Lindsay Wildminster. I am one of the leads of the Business and Environment Club at the Yale School of Management. And I'm super excited to welcome you to our event, Turning Purpose into Practice, an Alumni Career Panel. Today, we'll dive into the careers of Yale faculty and alumni who are making a real impact across climate technology, business, and policy. We'll talk about how they've built meaningful careers in the climate space and how they've navigated uncertainty along the way. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you today, including Peter Boyd. Peter teaches at the Yale School of the Environment and is the founder and CEO of Time for Good. For more than 20 years, he's led and advised high-growth organizations on purpose-driven leadership and climate solutions. Steph Spears. Steph teaches at the Yale School of Management. She co-founded Solstice, where she served as CEO, connecting communities to clean energy. She's a climate entrepreneur who also advises organizations, serves on boards, and speaks regularly on climate solutions. Maggie Thomas. Maggie is the former Biden-Harris White House climate advisor. She served as the chief of staff in the White House Climate Policy Office. She also co-founded Evergreen Action and served on the presidential climate teams of Elizabeth Warren and Jay Inslee. And finally, Natasha Feshbach. Natasha is the fellowship manager at Activate New York, where she runs a 2-year program that helps scientists, entrepreneurs launch and grow deep tech climate companies. Okay, so here's the plan for the event. This session will start with a short talk from Peter on building a meaningful climate career. Then we'll move into a panel discussion with our speakers, and finally we'll finish with Q&A from all of you, our audience. One quick note, following this panel, there's going to be a networking lunch in the tap room, so if you don't get a chance to ask your question during the Q&A portion, or you just want to talk to our speakers further, please join us there. And finally, thank you to CBEY for supporting this event, and thank you to our speakers for being here. And with that, I'll hand it over to Peter.
Good morning, everybody. This is going to be an interactive panel, so we need some interaction as well. Thank you. Good to see you. Just get the right distance here. And you got here on Climate Week New York. Well done. Including our panelists as well, fighting across town. So I'm Peter Boyd. I've been introduced, so I don't need to say any of that. But in terms of the context of this turning purpose into practice, I thought I'd give you a bit of background on me and why it brings me to this and why you might be here as well. So where I work and where I get most excited is at this Venn diagram of connected leadership, which I will unpack in just a second, the great work, and a coaching mindset. And so what I mean by that, and I try and mash these circles together so that things like this very session is right in the middle of my Venn diagram. So I try and create as many activities as possible that are in the middle of my purpose. So connected leadership is a tool. I believe passionately that leadership can be taught, that anyone can be a better leader wherever they are. And then the great work is one of my, I think, best phrases that I've heard in this tour of climate, the environment, trying to protect sort of our species and our planet. The great work is a work by Thomas Berry saying that, sort of humanity has these different eras where the task is obvious. And now we've got one. The great work of the 20th century is to work out how to be a benign force on ourselves and everything else in the planet that we share. And then the coaching mindset, the last one. I am a coach, both inside Yale and outside Yale, member of International Coaching Federation. I do some sort of one-on-one executive coaching as well as one-on groups. But the key thing about a coaching mindset, you don't have to be a coach to have a coaching mindset. The key thing about a coaching mindset is that the belief is in the brilliance of the other person that you're with. And you're not fixing them because they're not broken. You're just trying to partner them and get them bigger and better. So you can tell by these 3 pieces why a gathering like this, talking about turning purpose into practice, is right in the middle of that Venn diagram. So my purpose, we're going to talk about the panelist purpose for most of the time, but my purpose I thought we'd share with you is that on a vision terms, like what's the world I work for and hopefully get up for every day, is that our world learns to live and lead for good, and obviously both for good in the long term and for good of the planet. And that my mission, like what am I trying to do about it, is to uplift leaders wherever they are, and that's on their journey as well as in the world, to maximize their time for good. So a question for you just to start off with here. How many of you here feel like you are at a big fork in the road right now? Wow. Okay. That's why you came. Okay. Panelists, look around. Excellent. Okay. So I want to unpack this question and almost like both challenge the people that didn't put their hand up and challenge the people that did put their hand up at the same time. Has anyone seen this diagram? I love Tim Urban, Wait But Why. I pull him into the course I'm going to talk about. This is great because it's just like, these are the paths closed to you that you did take, but you took this one. And sometimes we get obsessed with the black side. And then these are the paths that are open to you. Here's the future. So for all those that thought, like, I didn't put my hand up on that last one because I'm not at a fork in the road. Oh, yes, you are. You're here, and you have a number of amazing choices ahead of you, even to the extent of eating for lunch, who to meet in Climate Week. You're always at a fork in the road. But then the other piece is, are you at a really big fork in the road, which I put into the question? I'd rather sort of almost like challenge everyone that did put their hand up. But first, I'll put another piece in here as well as another question. Has anyone seen this piece about the humility sweet spot? The idea is that, hopefully we're growing in our careers up in both knowledge and conviction over the years. But we have two dangers. We have a danger of dropping off our sweet spot and becoming insecure. Actually, we know more than we have conviction. And then the other piece is we have a danger of floating up every so often as well, where our conviction gets ahead of our knowledge. And the idea here is obviously to learn and grow through the sweet spot. So looking at this, another show of hands. Who here says, on balance, my risk is dropping off this into the bottom quadrant? Any hands up? So more on that side. How many here go, if I'm honest, my danger is floating up. My conviction gets ahead of myself. A couple as well. Okay, but less. And then somebody goes, I'm navigating. That's good. You're navigating. But that's a sort of in general. I like this follow-up chart that says actually for most things that are hard, there's actually a journey. And this idea of like, hey, I'm absolutely sure this is awesome, and oh no, I'm totally not. And then what's the wiggly grown-up sort of journey? And so I think that idea, I think these two themes are hopefully important for you in terms of this idea of a fork in the road that we're all at, and this idea of like, are we navigating this conviction knowledge journey as we try and build a meaningful career for ourselves and helping others do the same. I said I'd come back to the people that said, like, they put up their hand and said, I'm at a really big fork in the road. Anyone at this event a couple of nights ago? Great one in Climate Week is my inspiration of the week so far. Hopefully you all had an inspiration of your week so far. If not, we can help you today. But this was Ben Christensen, a Yale alum and entrepreneur and founder of Cambium Carbon. Circular supply chains in wood, fantastic company, look it up. And then Alex Honnold, may remember him, free climbing, unbelievable climber. And they were chatting about lessons from the backcountry, how to be resilient in the face of challenges that this man knows about on the mountain and this man knows about in climate, and indeed ultra running. And the key piece there, they broke down and challenged the big fork and said, if you think of it as a big fork, you tend to almost get wrapped up in yourself and you might not make the choice. And whether it's ascending a rock or building a company, what's the next best thing? And if you know what the next best thing is, make a good decision, go for it, iterate, try. But if you're building a big fork in your mind, you might be sort of not helping yourself, whether you're on a rock face or whether you're running an ultramarathon or building a startup. These are probably two of the coolest posters I saw in Climate Week. So there are not too many climate posters like this, but just that idea of bringing that resilience to it. I actually, part of my background, I helped get Ben on there. This is our tent. We ran together in this race. And this was me on it with Ben coming to the finish line. It's 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara, so you try and pick something hard to do and do it with others. I did it 20 years ago. It turns out, when you're Ben's age, it's a lot easier. Um, but I did it with him. And just the points here that I picked from the race and Ben picked out in that event, I think are potentially worth us thinking about for this idea of turning purpose into practice and building long-term careers, is that you are stronger than you realize. And if you do set a really big goal, it's really quite interesting how the world aligns up to help you get there. You can only do hard things in community. You can only do hard things together, whether it's this bunch of crazies or whether it's sort of a team on a job, on a startup. Like you can't do it alone. Admin's really important, like putting things together in a spreadsheet, hustling, doing things right. It is in your head. It is in your choices. And that really getting too wedded to the outcome is really hard. You have to get wedded to the process and showing up every day. And there were some inspiring stories from Honnold on a rock face and Christensen building his company on that idea of just like showing up every day, whether it's searching for your next job, whether it's sort of building the next part of your startup, just how important getting wedded to the process is more than the outcome. So I wanted to just spend my couple of minutes left before we open up to the panel talking about the need of turning purpose into practice, a thought on it for life, and a thought about it in your job. The need is just, sort of, how many people here have read Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning? If not, why not? This is on the read list. If there's one thing for Climate Week, take this short book, huge story. But that idea of like giving ourselves meaning is probably one of the biggest sort of jobs for us all in life. And it's often found, as Frankl was talking about, in creative work, meaningful relationships, and a positive attitude to suffering. And if you read the book, he has an incredibly unique sort of thought and life experience on that. And then the other need, so that's the need for you. Hopefully, the more you turn purpose into practice, the more you become happier and have a meaningful life. There's also a need for the planet. And I got obsessed with this book, Moral Ambition. It just came out in spring by Rutger Bregman, a Dutch historian. And it was a real challenge to all our generations to have moral ambition. That idea of don't just have idealism and don't just have ambition. He accuses, with a slightly broad brush, my generation of being ambitious but not idealistic enough. We had ideals in undergrad, and we left them behind to put our kids through school, and maybe we might later in life, go to philanthropy and make something nice happen. That was his accusation to like the older generations. And then his accusation to the younger generations were, you're not talking to people you disagree with. You're creating a place where it's like of ideological purity. You're not getting things done, and because you're afraid to talk to people that you don't disagree with. Now, two big accusations. We say, that's not me. Great, that's not us, because we actually need to be on here. Be both ambitious and moral. So that's another, I think, challenge on the sort of, not only do you need it, hopefully, to chase meaning, but also the world needs you to chase meaning. So how do you do that in life? In terms of the thought is to be connected leadership. That's what I teach. It's a almost free course on Coursera, as well as something that we cover here in Yale in the School of the Environment. In fact, I see a few teaching fellows and students in the room, which is awesome. Hands up. There they are. Yes. Go and talk to them in the networking lunch. Either give them a job or no, it's great. So it's great. They can answer questions on any of this stuff. But the idea of turning purpose into practice in life is to connect oneself almost in two dimensions. The idea of connecting your purpose to your priorities, what you spend time on, to what your vision is for the future that you're heading towards, and then holding yourself accountable to actually get something done on those top three. And it's not that your world falls apart or the rope falls apart if you're afraid and not current on one of these, but your rope is at the strongest when you are centered and mindful on all four. That's when the rope is at its strongest. And then the other dimension is the idea of being connected and knowing those 4 Ps across yourself. Lead yourself. You can't do anything hard unless it's with others, your team. And then what is the system that you're actually trying to change? So connected from purpose to progress, self to system. And for those that know me, I wouldn't sort of stop a presentation like this by getting the rocks in there. The idea of like really knowing what's important. Putting the rocks in your jar first, then the pebbles, they fit around the edges, then the sand. Live life on the top row. Don't live life on the bottom row where you let your small stuff in, and then the medium stuff, and then you get to the end of life, the year, the quarter, your job hunt, whatever it is, and you've only fitted 1 or 2 rocks in. So then, if that's turning purpose into practice in your life, career, we've got a course coming out on Coursera just this week, and that's one of the reasons, of many reasons, that we put this event together. Was just this idea of like, how do you put this together in a job hunt for the next thing? Either you don't have a job and you're looking, if you're pivoting, or you're just wanting to get ahead and promoted in the same direction. And the thought here is to have a think about is three levels, 2 triangles, and a square. 3 levels. The idea is start with yourself first. Do the work. Do the inner work to know who you are and to know why you're out here and what you want to contribute to the world. Then think about the stories that bring your completely amazing life and your unique lived experience to life, given that inner work of yourself. What are your favorite stories? Then go out and hustle. And so often, and I've been on many sides of this, either coaching people or interviewing for jobs, tasks where I've been on the hiring side, is this like, I find people concentrating on the sell, not really being anchored to their stories, maybe picking some bad ones that don't fit what I'm trying to hire for, and then do they really know themselves? So go upwards, don't go down. And then the 2 triangles, really being clear on these 2 questions a lot. And I'm going to be asking the panel to help us with this. What am I really looking for? So can I really bring to life the next job in my head? And I'm looking for these things, A, B, C, and D. And that's based on these 10 stories. So that's the idea of almost like a triangle pitch. And then what am I excited to bring? What's uniquely me? I think any employer should be really excited about these 4 things, and that's built on these 10 stories. And then you don't get lost in your narrative. You've pre-planned it before you write the job letter, before you've gone into networking Climate Week, before you've gone to the interview. And then the final thought is a square. And I think that's for all of us. I think we need it, whether it's in Climate Week, whether it's in a job interview and it's networking. It's just taking the time to breathe and reset and be absolutely fully present in the room you're in before you step into that room. And so box breathing is a thing from Navy SEALs through to many other elite performers. The idea of just breathing in for 4 beats, holding full lungs for 4, breathing out for 4, and holding empty for 4. Maybe do it a couple of times, and then you're ready. So with that, these courses are live, and we want to hear from hopefully the panelists had a time to breathe there as I was. We're ready for a great panel. These are the 2 resources. Connected Leadership is an online course that over 100,000 enrolled, is about a couple of years old. It's out there. And then this is what we launched today / this week, The Hunt, Job Searching and Career Building with Purpose. Coursera were very nice to me. They said, this is good, like, it's popular, etc. Can you make this one a little shorter? So this is about 30 hours of learning. This is about 10 hours. We're reacting to the demand out there that is attention challenged. So there you go. So hopefully you get the nuggets as you like. So with that, I wanted to explain my in the course, and then in the cover page is a set of lions. I am fascinated. Has anyone here been on safari? Yep, quite a few of you. Watching a lion hunt, you know that it's always females, and they hunt incredibly cleverly together. It is just jaw-dropping how they put a hunt together. So the first image for this thing was two male lions that says, no, it has to be female, because they're the ones that hunt. The male lions just fight each other. They're useless. So we had to change the graphic over. And so it's so apt that we have an all-female panel. And I'm just the useless person on this side. So we have Natasha Feshbach. Welcome to the stage, everybody. Well, Natasha, Steph, and Maggie. But but it's Francis Maggie in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Um,
Talk to my parents.
and the reason I'm putting up the LinkedIn here is twofold. One is so you can network with us all, not just at lunch, but on LinkedIn. The other one is LinkedIn is huge if you're trying to turn purpose into practice and trying to get to your next job. So sort of live and be very active on LinkedIn as you hunt. And then the other one was there's a competition here. It's very small font. Who here do you think has the most connections with me already? The answer is Steph Spears. You win on 139 mutual connections, 75 with Natasha, and 98 with Maggie. So we're all connected already. But it's our first time all together. So can you just introduce yourselves in terms of how you think this term means to you, turning purpose into practice? What do you think it means?
It's funny that you mentioned Viktor Frankl. When everyone asks me my favorite business leadership book, I say Man's Search for Meaning, because he says that any person who has a why can bear any how. And he's actually quoting Nietzsche in the book a lot. So if you have a why, you can bear any how. I just spent the last decade building a startup. So there was a lot of bearing of the how in that decade. And it was the most meaningful thing I'd ever done. And so I started out in politics, I did impact investment, I did business, and now I am in starting a media business.
I think this means to me like work with smart people who care, and I think that's what I've sought in the different stages of my career, and really am at a place right now that I have found that, and I'm very grateful. And I just think when you have a group of people that have momentum to move forward, it's exciting, especially in this space that can not always be so exciting and be kind of bring you down. But if you are surrounded by the right people and build the right team, I think that's what inspires me at least to go for the right mission.
I'm sorry to say that from your presentation, the thing that really stuck out to me was suffering with a good attitude, which I think is the perfect way to describe working for 4 years in the White House. And, there's a lot of things about working in government that you can sort of put a negative spin on. You don't make very much money. You work extremely long hours. There are a lot of people who are telling you no. Like, it's truly incredible how many ways someone can tell you no in government. And yet, if you want to make the greatest change, if you want to be able to pull the biggest lever, particularly on, the existential threat of our time, like climate change, there is no better place to do that than be in government. And yeah, so I think there was a lot about that presentation that was definitely resonated with me. Maybe talk to me next year. Maybe the suffering part won't be quite so front of mind.
That won't be so fresh. Well, maybe let's talk about some of the choices then, because you are in different sectors and tours of different sectors as well. So, what were some of the choices that when, in order to live with purpose, or indeed just to go to the next level, I want to go this way. What were some of your choices?
When I was an undergrad, I went to a talk by Clinton advisor Paul Begala, and he said that he is so grateful he got this piece of advice in his career, that treat your career like a toolbox. You never know which tool you'll need, and spend the early years gathering as many tools as possible, as many skills and experience as possible, and then figure out what it is you want to do. And so 20 years into my career, I feel like now I'm about to specialize, but I have spent the last 20 trying to be as helpful as possible to whoever who asked. So I said yes to most things. It wasn't as conscious of a choice, especially I started out after college working on the Obama campaign, then they worked in the White House, and from there went to grad school. And the choice was really to work in climate from there. So I couldn't find a job actually in a lot of the places I looked in the US. And so I went where I got a job, which was in Pakistan. So I was a 30-year-old intern in Pakistan working for an investment company investing in renewable energy projects. And that led down a road of starting my own business. So I was really open to whatever possibilities came.
And gathering tools effectively and putting them in the box. And you said climate filter, but where can I be most help?
Yeah.
How did you make your choices?
I think I've never known what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I still don't. So I kind of go about most of my decisions like knowing that it will help inform the next one and not like put so much pressure on what exactly it is right now. But I think I kind of came to love climate and the environment through my love of food, and so I studied food systems and environmental science in college, and then like worked very deeply in that after. And then I went to YSC, and at YSC I kind of was still really in that food space, but then leaving YSC, I was just not finding a job in that like area at all. Like food, I don't think has met its moment yet, and I can't wait for it to. But I just kind of had to reprioritize what was really meaningful to me at that time. And it was just people. I was like, I just really want to work with smart people, and maybe that's not in food right now, and that's okay. And that's how I kind of found my way to working in deep tech, which I didn't really expect. But it kind of has like, I would say, an unsexiness. You know, it's not software, it's like machines and air conditioning and things that you don't think about that need to change. And so that was okay, and I get to engage in food systems like in my own life and still be really passionate about that, but that doesn't right now need to be like the center of my career. And I definitely had to make that choice to like find, you know, where I wanted to be in the role that was fulfilling. So I'm excited for food to continue to grow, but you know, it's not right now, and that's okay.
Yeah, you know, similar to what Natasha was saying, I actually always wanted to be a marine biologist, and I worked so hard to try to become a marine biologist. Like, I studied abroad, I did my senior thesis, like, underwater so I could scuba dive and count the fish. Like, I worked really hard to try to get there, and then I just couldn't get a job in marine science. And you know, I think I took it very personally, and it sort of felt like all of this education that I had, you know, was for naught. And then it turned out that I ended up getting jobs more in the public land space. And I remember this moment just thinking, I was working in California, and I knew I wanted to work in politics. I knew I wanted to go to DC. And the only option to get to DC was to take a job as an intern for an organization that did public lands related work. And I was like, I don't think I really even want to do that, but like, it's the only way that I can get there. And so I said yes. And so I think very similar to kind of both of what you're saying is, as you're building your career, you do need to build the toolbox. Sometimes you say yes to things, not because you think it's the perfect thing for you at the moment, but because there will be some benefit down the road for you. And, you know, ultimately, I've never looked back. I still am not a marine biologist. I am incredibly proud of the career that I've had, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
And I'd love to pick up just on some themes there. So it sounded like, Natasha, you ended up not chasing, but like latching on to great people. But the question to you would be like, did you get the tools? And then Steph, you sort of almost like chased tools, but did you find great people that way? Natasha, do you want to go first?
Tools, you mean?
Like the tools in the toolbox to stretch Steph's career advice analogy.
Yeah, I think that's always been harder, you know, to pick them up along the way. And I think I have honestly struggled to like find, I think, great mentorship over time in my life. And that's something I've, you know, had to really seek out and make sure that's like a part of my journey, but it never like came easily to me, I feel like, when I was younger. And so, yeah, just making sure that that does exist too. But that's definitely the harder part.
You, Steph?
When I left my last job, I said that I had felt very, very lucky to spend kind of 4 chapters of my career working with people that I truly, truly loved. And that felt more rare in the professional career. And I think it was working on labors of love that were often very, very low paid, meant that the people around you were working for the right reasons. And so if you joined the Obama campaign in 2007, you were not in it because you thought you were going to win. You were in it because you thought you had to work for this guy because his values matched yours. If you were working on renewable energy, like solar and off-grid communities in rural India and rural Pakistan, you were not in it for the glory. And so finding those people has made all the difference, because I actually haven't applied for a job in 20 years because those people created opportunities. And sometimes it's not apparent until 15 years down the line after you meet them, but that those opportunities are ever present if you have these deep relationships. Last thing I'll say is I think what I've realized about success in a career after a couple decades, with many failures that we should talk about, is that success is compounding, right? It's like that 1% rule. If you do 1% improvement every day for a year, you end the year 37 times better. But every day it's just like, just do a little bit better. Compounding interest in your bank account, your entire savings doubles every 7 years, right? It's playing the long game. It's not any one thing. And relationships with people and treating them well and kind of every moment along the way, you have no idea until later how that will be returned to you because people are generous and loving too.
Great, that's great. And I'm thinking, why am I having so much fun at age 50? And it's probably that then. It's all compound interest. Excellent. Where are you on this sort of picking up skills, / tools in the box and people? What do you think you were chasing?
I think you have to do both of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to say you can have it all. When I was at YSE, I did the thing that I was advised by a lot of people to absolutely not do, which is to take 16 classes in 16 different disciplines. And I know it's not allowed now, and I was like part of the final class that could do that. So take what I say with a grain of salt. But
you ruined it for them.
But I wanted to be able to know what I didn't know. Like for me, that was kind of my North Star. So I took classes at the business school. I took classes at the law school. I took classes at Yale College. I took a negotiations class because what is it that we do all day in climate and environment work if not negotiate with people, right? Like we're in the negotiation of our lives, really, on a day-to-day basis. And so I think from a tools perspective, kind of I really went for breadth and not depth, and that's been very reflected in the career that I've had. And I will always be a generalist, and that is who I am. And it is because of a place like YSE that, for everything that I don't know, which is a lot of things, I know who to call. And most of the time, those are, my former classmates at YSE. So those relationships, I think, have been incredibly important. And then just to kind of what Steph was saying, I think, it is true, anytime you're in a work environment that is a labor of love, in order to do that, you have to trust your colleagues, you have to feel that camaraderie with them, and you have to believe that together you can do it. And I'll just tell one funny story, which is that my office mate in the White House, who, we spent, Lord knows, 12 plus hours a day together, right, for years on end. This reporter, ran into her in DC, and she was like, oh, something, and said something about oh, do you know Maggie? And my office mate goes, oh yeah, that's my roommate. And it's like this big long joke with us now, that's we became such close colleagues and such close friends that we refer to each other as roommates. We don't actually refer to each other as colleagues.
And maybe even spent more time with them than the actual roommate.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm tempted to go to mistakes, but let's go high first. If you can pick from your careers that moment, and we do this in the course sometimes, think about Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow state, that just idea of I'm in it. And purpose and practice are one. This feels amazing. I'm in the right place at the right time. Where would you go first? Where did your heart and head go when I said, where was that moment in your career so far? There's plenty more moments to come, obviously. But where's that moment where you just think, purpose, practice, flow, I'm here, I'm in the right place at the right time? Who wants to go first? You go, Natasha first. Yeah, let's
Sure.
vary who starts. Otherwise, Steph's going to get all the first shots.
I do think too, I feel like in the environment, a lot of us are generalists too, and that's actually, I feel like, a really hard place to start your career because you're like, wait, how do I focus? And so I would just say, I think being a generalist is such a huge asset, and you have to do the hard things at the beginning to then get to that place that you can really excel. So I'm totally in agreement with you both. But I think the place that I found myself really in a flow state, and I still continue to do, is I came to my job because I really cared about climate solutions, and I was like, I'm ready to kind of help companies accelerate, and we need these changes. But I stay and I love it is because of the like leadership development aspect. So like at the end of the day, it's about helping these scientists completely change their mindsets and become leaders. And at the end of the day, like maybe the technology doesn't work or the startup fails, as many startups do, like that person is going to be a better, more sustainable and like more just leader moving forward because of like the process that they've been through and like what I've helped them with. So that is like what kind of keeps me going and makes me feel like it is really a long game as opposed to just like this technology right now.
Jump in.
Yeah, I think I would like to think I've had many flow states
Good.
in my career. I've been incredibly fortunate and lucky in the jobs that I've had and the elected officials that I've gotten to work for. I think the one that really comes to mind for me, though, is when I got a job working for then Governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, who decided he was going to run a presidential campaign on climate. Which is not something one would normally do if you think you're going to become the president of the United States, with all due respect to the American people. Like, it's a hard way to like enter into a presidential campaign. But it was the right thing to do, right? And I mean, we all can look back and opine on the history and sort of the progress that was made across 19 people running for president and how climate policy changed over the course of that race. And I just remember feeling so lucky and fortunate, but also like I was so useful to have this very sort of niche skill set of working at the intersection of climate and politics and like planning a trip to a small town in Iowa for the governor because there had just been a massive flood. And we were the only people to go and talk to this local business and talk about why climate was a driver of the flooding that they had just experienced and how the economic devastation that they had experienced to their business was actually a result of climate change. Or the pollution that communities outside of Detroit were experiencing was a result of, the economic drivers of the creation of chemicals in these plants, and I just remember feeling very much at the intersection of sort of purpose and practice in that moment. And you don't work on a presidential campaign unless you believe that the person can win. And I think it took a lot of courage, both for the governor to put a campaign forward like that, and then also sort of for the very small group of us to kind of come behind him. But that was it was a really incredible experience.
That's great. Steph.
Like Maggie, there are many moments where I feel like I've been so lucky to be at the right place at the right time. I was working in the Middle East office when the Arab Spring happened, working on the Obama campaign. But actually, I felt my first thing that came to mind when you asked the question was just this week. I was in rural Utah in a town of 1,000 people called Milford, red town, red state, and they have the largest geothermal plant. The company Fervo is building a 600 megawatt
Activate company.
plant. The Activate company, exactly. And I was filming the townspeople's reaction to the clean energy project. And people said things like, I thought when the hog farm closed, I would have to move away, and now I get to stay in the town that I grew up in and I love because Fervo jobs were brought in. Another woman who owned a diner said, my business has 3x'd thanks to this geothermal plant. And I actually don't know that much about clean energy because we don't get taught it, but now I'm interested more in it because, it's affecting our local town. And I was like, this feels like the right moment at the right time to hear this message in such a dark time in climate and the world. Like, what people want is the same thing everywhere. They want to take care of their kids. They want a job that gives them dignity. They want to be around people they love. And so clean energy can be a vehicle for that. Climate can be a vehicle for that. And we're not hearing that story. So getting to tell that story is very much a flow moment.
And it was this week.
This week.
Excellent. So maybe flip it then. So that idea of where you feel disconnected, like you don't feel purpose and practice, or like I'm in the wrong place, wrong time. Think of that place, and then if you can describe for everyone, because I think it's helpful, it's like, what did you do? What did you first think, and then what did you do about it to move on? You look ready, Steph. You can go. Jump
Yeah,
in.
I think I can
I don't think you
go.
started yet. Go for it.
When you work at the White House, there are a lot of people who are incredibly smart. They are at the top of their field. Many of them have that graph that you showed about sort of confidence and a lack of confidence. Many of them very high up.
Dangerous and slow.
Very high up on the graph. Yeah. And my office was the first ever climate office in a White House. There had never been a climate office. And a White House is a huge institution. And so when a new office comes in, like, there are lots of people that sort of come back to a White House, administration after administration, and there's muscle memory that comes from that. So whether it's the processes, the people who are in the room, kind of all of that has to change. And it was our office's job to sort of be the internal consultant on climate to get people to understand what was the value of having the climate perspective at the table across lots of different sectors of the economy, across sort of all of the different policies that we were looking at. And there were so many times that, our issue was pitted against another issue. And, rather than sort of say the climate issue is at odds with the economic issue, which is what it boiled down to most of the time, I had to come in and my team had to come in and sort of say, actually, how can we reframe the way that we look at this? And how can we grow the pie? How can we use creativity in the way that we're going to solve this problem so that our two issues are not at odds with one another? It's not in memo format, it's not option 1 or option 2, but actually that there's an option 3. And that was a very big part of the role that me and my team had to play. So I think there are times when sort of purpose and practice maybe aren't aligned, but I think the role of creativity is not to be understated in how you can actually navigate out of that situation.
Can I push you, since you've still got the mic up there? So that sounds like an interesting one where in the moment it's difficult. I'm thinking also of a place in your career where you were the opposite of right person, right seat, right time. Because it sounded like that last example sounded like you were the right person for the job.
Yeah.
Keep going. It's hard, but that sounds awesome.
Well, no one else thought I was the right person for the job, to be clear.
Well, hey, but it's in here. So I'd say, like, have you ever done this? So it's like, wrong person, wrong time, wrong mission. I got to get out of here.
Yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate in my career. I can't think of an
You haven't
example
got one.
like that. I mean, I've been very intentional about what I've done, and I don't know. Can you guys go and then
There
maybe
you go.
I'll think
Yeah,
about
and see if you can
it?
spark off it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it's like that wasn't my question. So
Yeah,
yes,
I knew
but that
I
was
wasn't answering
But it was a good one.
Thank you.
So there are 2 times in which my board told me I was doing things a CEO should never do. And I will also say that in the 10 years I ran my company, not a single investor ever asked me, how do you treat your employees? How do you retain your employees? Like, those were never due diligence questions, even though they're incredibly important to making a successful business. Yeah. I was always asked, what's your TAM? What are your numbers? And so one time was when we were bringing in a new product manager, and because of what she was earning and what we needed to pay her to recruit her, we would have had to pay her more than everyone else on the product team. And so I made the case to my board that we should recalibrate the benchmark, because the previous salaries had been set at a lower level. There's been inflation, so let's just raise the other people's salaries to be equitable. And they were like, why would you do that? No one knows that this other woman who's coming in is going to earn more. And I was like, someone will find out, but it's also the right thing to do. And the idea that especially women and women of color are often earning less than someone doing the same job. Yep. Like, how else are we going to rectify that if not at a company by company level? Secondly, when the decision to sell my company was earlier than I thought, and it came because competitors and some partners made offers on the company at a time in which I was kind of feeling resentful that my investors were not more concerned about serving all customers, including low-income customers. It was always about profit maximization. I didn't start a business to do business as usual. I started a business to make sure solar got to everyone. And 50% of our customers were low income. And so to answer your question, I realized that I needed different kinds of investors that had a longer outlook and weren't looking at things from a quarterly returns basis. And so we ended up selling to a conglomerate that's been around since the 1600s. And so they have a long-term view. They know how to run businesses in the long term. And in the sale of the company, I asked my investors if I could take a few $1 million and use it to retain my employees by paying them retention bonuses over 2 years. And so you can imagine the response of the investors were like, why would you do that? You don't have to do that. And these are people who had grown with the company for 7, 8 years. They poured their soul when we were nothing and we were about to make a sale. Like it was the sensible thing to do. It was also the strategic good business thing to do, because if you retain your company, your best talent, you will continue to perform at the level you've been performing. And so I think there are points of friction where business as usual, particularly if you're trying to build a new business that operates differently, is going to come into tension. And it was that kind of thinking that eventually led me to get rid of my investors, even though actually this doesn't leave the room, right?
This is all totally Chatham House, totally.
I think they're great people. It's just the incentive structures that they're operating in.
And it pushed that one for a tiny little further. Was it like a feel like the values are different?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be about how do we get a better margin? How do we, decrease costs and increase revenue? That's what investors who are seeking higher returns want, right? And I think business is an important driver for solving climate change. I'm not an anti-capitalist. I ran a business, but I don't think that the businesses operating as all businesses in the world is going to solve some of the systemic problems that are creating the worst challenges of our time. And so I think we need to rethink how business operates. We need to instead of socializing costs to the environment, take some of those costs on as businesses, and we have to demonstrate that. But it's not a popular opinion.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, that resonates so much. We could talk a lot about how VC can certainly ruin a mission, but mine kind of goes back to world crisis. I graduated from college in 2020, so immediately into the pandemic, and I was looking for a job in the environment, and every single conversation I had was the most depressing conversation. Like, people were like, it's not gonna work, like Trump's gonna win, like, no, just bad, amidst kind of a global pandemic, also bad. And so in that moment, I was like, that graph very much resonated with me. I was like right at the zero of confidence, where I was like, I chose the wrong thing. Like, I could have gone down like a consulting or finance route that so many of my peers at Yale did, and like they already had a job, they were already getting kind of like that validation, and I was just stuck. And I really doubted, like, okay, like, why did I drive so hard to make this decision? And so I think that's when I really felt like, oh, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time, and like I'm not gonna see this to fruition. But then I think I had to like artificially put myself on the other side of that graph in the confidence, where I just had to like take a leap and like trust myself. I like moved to Washington, D.C. I didn't have a job. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just was like, I have to trust that like I'm going to figure it out. But there was a lot of doubt along the way. And like that does still creep up, where I'm like, maybe I could have just gone down an easier route to begin with. And then, things would be different now. But I'm glad that I didn't. And I feel that, it's hard in the moment though. And it was really tough. I hope that answered the question a little bit. I don't know. It's hard.
Kind of. It sounds like none of you made career errors. That just seems like, oh, I could go on for hours on this one. No, but there's nowhere you thought, because of a choice of mine, I'm in either with the wrong people. Maybe that I think yours got closest to there. Like, maybe these investors just aren't quite with me, or I'm on the wrong job, and then therefore I need a jump. Like that idea of like that feeling of I've got to leave this room and go into a different room. Did you ever have that? No.
My first job in the Obama administration was not at the White House. It was at everyone's favorite agency, the Department of Homeland Security. And I worked for a tyrant of a boss who was really, really, really cruel to people. And I stayed there. I was like, I have to stay here for a year because we're going to get immigration reform done. We're going to get immigration reform done. And then they decided not to do immigration reform. And so I pieced. And that's when someone offered me the role at the White House. So yeah, that happens. And you don't know until you do the thing sometimes if it's going to be a fit for you or if there's going to be a toxic environment.
Exactly, and that's where I was linking it with yours, Natasha, because like you're chasing good people. Is like there's been many a room I think I've been in where I've gone, these aren't the people that I can work with.
Okay, yes, I can answer that. I would say so. The job that I went to in DC, I worked at the Capital Area Food Bank, so the biggest food bank in that area. Ran this direct distribution program for seniors during COVID. Very chaotic, but very rewarding, as you can imagine. But over time, I think, first of all, the people that I was working with and for were definitely challenging, and I didn't feel that those were like the right people that were going to help me drive my career. But then at the end of the day, I didn't feel like the metrics that we were working with were like meaningful at all. So we would distribute food, but it was all based on pounds because pounds equals meals, and that's how you solicit donor dollars. But really, people don't want like heavy canned food. They want fresh fruits and vegetables, and that's much lighter. So we were like artificially kind of changing what we're sending to bolster the numbers, and I was just like, I don't know how to feel about that. And like, that's just a product of like a system that's very broken, right? Because the money is coming from the government for that specific canned food, not for the fresh fruits and vegetables. That's much more expensive to buy. And it's a really tough thing where like you have to meet people where they're at in the moment, but also like work to solve that systemic change at the same time. So actually that was maybe a room that I really chose to left, and I thought a lot about that when I was back at YSE. Yeah.
So maybe link this to the sort of both the times you referenced in graduating 2020, and now like people here sort of saying thanks for graduating now as well. So it's tough times, and I think we had a recent survey in Yale just how many of the recent graduates are still looking, and it's high. So, but we've had tough times before, and you've had tough times in your careers. What got you out both from a self perspective, and then what hope can you sort of bring others, and saying like that, is there any messages of hope in there as well? But first, let's go self-care. Like what? How do you look after yourself when times are tough?
I got a dog in that moment in 2020. Good. Yep. I got a dog, and he's still like my best friend, lives with me in New York, and it was just one of those things that I needed to focus on something else that like wasn't me to get me out of that, and get me outside and, get me doing all of the fun, amazing things. So that like always, self-care and a companion.
So a dog, that's a good one. Mag, what's your advice?
I have an equivalent, which is I had a baby on Christmas Day. And that
Slightly
was
more complicated.
Yeah, it is. But whatever divine intervention happened that allowed me to have a baby like weeks before this administration ended was just incredible. And yeah, it's been, it was my job to make sure that I knew every piece of news, right? Every twist of whatever reporter was saying, and kind of be fully in it. And there has been something so incredible about having Henry, my son, to just kind of pull me out of it and sort of say, like, actually, there's something more to life, and you can both, have the career that you want to have while also loving someone else and loving something else. And I think for somebody, I will admit I certainly am a bit of a workaholic, and like the graph of like ambition and idealism, I think I would score very high on both of those, I would say. And for me, it took something so life altering as to have a baby to sort of pull me out of it and recognize that it's okay to sort of take a break or step away kind of from a career. And I don't mean to suggest that everyone should like go out and have a baby, but that's very maha. But, I think whatever it is in your life that could sort of provide that altering moment, I think is worth reflecting on, because like your career will go on, the world will go on. And yeah, it's been like I don't read the news in the way that I do anymore, and I'm so much happier. It's great.
Yeah, that's great.
Having friends, deep friendships that don't give a shit about your career is really helpful, because if you fail in it or
Technical
you have
term.
hard moments, they are very grounding. And I think it's maybe everyone, if you work in climate or the environment, you care about it. Like the outdoors is such a healing place. I think it's apt that this is called the hunt, because I like to hunt and spearfish, but you can't take your phone with you. Like you have to be so present. You have to listen. You have to, especially underwater, you just observe, and there's so much wonder and awe to be found in the outdoors. Like how could you not feel more grounded, and like you are a small piece in the cosmic history of this place, and that everything's going to be okay.
That's great. Thank you. So there's some great tips for everybody. Not everyone can have a baby, as you say, but dogs and friends and outdoors is ubiquitous. That's great. And quick book plug, I think, for those generalists, I think is Range, David Epstein, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World, is a good one for that idea of like creating that sort of horizontal expertise, not necessarily vertical. Fantastic. So, and talking about the sort of the protection, the self-protection, that idea of like working out what's in your spheres of control, what's in your sphere of influence, and then letting, as the poem goes, letting the other pieces be. What's your more practical pieces in the sort of the tough times? Like, how do you see the markets you're in right now? Because you're all in very slightly different markets here. So say a bit more about the industry. And you said you're focusing now for one of the first times. So maybe talk about what you see there. And do you see emergence? Like where do you see the points of light?
Yeah, so the media projects I'm doing are all related to climate tech, and so it is fun to kind of look at the climate tech trends and see what is gonna be more in demand in the future, like grid modernization and demand response as our electricity supply is not getting built fast enough and our electricity demand is increasing. That's obviously a good bet, and things like nuclear, both fission and fusion. Geothermal are really easy to get funding for. I don't think, though, that if you were to work in wind and solar right now, that's a bad career option. There was going to be so much wind and solar built, and we will continue to work to get more incentives on a federal level in place down the line when we get government again. And on a state and local level, it's so important that we continue to incentivize the fastest sources of electricity we can build, right? So I think I will say that like you can look at industry trends and make smart strategic decisions based on that. Despite the fact that I've worked for the last decade in community solar, I will recommend to no one to work in community solar right now, because it's gonna be hard hit after 2027, and it's extremely Byzantine to implement on a very utility by utility level. The credits that get and how they get deployed on your utility bill is broken. Like this utility software sucks, and so working in it feels like getting punched in the face a lot. So don't do that. But
good tip.
I will say that I don't think if you are looking for a job in climate or in the environment that it's like matters that much to pick a job based on the trends that you think will be hot. I think that is really so much less important than the team and the people. Make sure if you can work with people that you admire, that you will want to have a relationship for the rest of your life with. Because if you play your cards right, you will have a relationship with them for the rest of your life, and they'll go on to do different things, and you never know what you'll get to do alongside them. So pick your ride or dies as how you pick your jobs, because that's way more important. And then make sure that what you're doing on a day-to-day basis is the thing that you could love doing. And that could literally be anything, like, from engineering and computer science to sales and marketing. Like every single climate business needs good, and the government needs good marketers. And so really figure out, like, can you enjoy the journey rather than being obsessed with some destination?
Great. Who's next?
Ooh. Deep climate tech is interesting right now. I think the past few months have been challenging for really early stage companies after the federal government decided that climate was not interesting anymore. So like hard tech requires a lot of capital, and getting that early is like really useful from the government in grant form, right? And so that's really challenging to a lot of people who are trying to build like first of a kind projects and things like that. And so I think our companies right now, like they've been just kind of at a crossroads of still trying to build, but also like being as lean as they possibly can and doing just whatever they can to kind of get to that next milestone when all of their funding has been paused or things like that. And so it also kind of changed the dynamic of the VC world as well. Climate tech was really, really heavily invested in like 2021, 2022, and we've just kind of seen it start to dip over time. I think companies that are really strong, they're still getting investment. Like you're still seeing that, but there's just generally less deals happening. And so I think what we think about is like, actually, how do we use this moment to like change that system? Because most hard tech companies are not built for like venture capital. Like that's just going to bloat them and kind of ruin the sustainable model that they could have. And so it's a really interesting conversation of like, okay, how do you actually take these what seem like failures or just misfits and actually try to write a new playbook for how companies can move forward but like generate revenue sustainably and really be a long-term solution. So I think very challenging, but also just different ways of working and different models kind of emerging from this time. So I just think, back to your point of creativity, right? Like you just have to problem solve. And as a startup, you're doing everything you possibly can to just survive to the next day. Like there's always a challenge, there's always a fire. And so if it's like the world falling down or it's something else, like you're always problem solving and whatever you can do to kind of get to that next point. I guess that didn't really talk about the market, but that being said, I think
or the points of light. No, I'm joking. My question was on the sort of, and the points of light. Yeah. Where do you see it?
I'm not going to opine on the market trends on climate and politics because I think we all know them. But I was going to talk about creativity as well, which I think in these moments and in these moments of incredible challenges, and it seems like kind of the levers that we had to make progress are no longer available to us. I think one of the things that I have come to appreciate and sort of was both fostered at my time during YSC, but particularly over my career in politics, is an understanding of how to be creative. And I think it's a skill that is not often one associated with people who go into policy and people who go into politics, but it's actually the thing that sets people apart who are successful and who are not. And I'll give you one example of a place where we had to be incredibly creative in the policy and the politics. So we were having a really hard time getting the people who own rest stops, which are basically just funded more or less by big oil, right? It's like transportation companies who operate vehicles that rely on fossil fuels. We'll call them Big Rest Stop for the purposes of this story. Big Rest Stop, very against installing EV chargers. However, there's this one law called the Randall-Shepard Act. Has anyone heard of it? No? Okay. I didn't know about it either, that actually governs the definition of what a vending machine is. And rest stops have to have vending machines. And so we thought to ourselves, great, let's just change the definition of a vending machine to include an EV charger. Like, they'll never get us then, right? And unfortunately, we didn't finish the regulation. It did require an active regulation. We did not finish it and get it across. We proposed it, but wasn't able to finalize it. But I tell you this story because also the Randall-Shepard Act falls under the Department of Education, not a place where my office spent a lot of time working. It largely allows primarily blind people to operate vending machines and sort of get first priority in the operation of them at a rest stop. Like, everything about this was like, there was nothing climate related at all, but somebody in my office had this moment of brilliance that was like, what if we just change the definition? What if we just change the rules so that, we can advance our agenda? And I say this because I think, like I said, you have to be creative in this line of work, and there will always be people who say no. There will always be points in your career where it seems like, the path that you were on isn't available to you anymore, or doors are closing. But that ability to be creative, and I think it's a real skill to learn how to be creative as well, is a way to sort of get out of the market trends, if I can bring it all back.
Fantastic. And to bring in different communities as well. And one of the panels I was on earlier this week was on the idea of I'm using language where the target market sort of identifies with, and not things like just transition and things like that, but just like helping these people, helping communities, etc., and sort of using a bridging language. We've covered a lot of ground here. I've got one last question, and we've probably got time for questions before the networking lunch starts on the hour. We've covered, I think, hopefully, definitely we covered your definition. We've covered a highlight. We've covered the hardship. There's a 3H exercise in all these sort of leadership workshops with hero is the third H. So I wanted to know, is there everyone to get to where you are, and everyone in this room, we've got there because or many people have helped us. What's a good example of a hero for you that you'd say this is a fantastic person in my career, this is how they helped me? Oh, you can tell the one was off script, can't you?
So many people.
Yeah. Who popped to mind, though? There's one. Did there one come there?
Yeah.
From the heart.
My mom. Isaac Newton says, if I've seen farther, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And I had the opportunities that my mom never had as a woman who couldn't graduate from college, as an immigrant, as a single mom of 3 on a very low wage. And so I think about all the secret co-founders around the co-founder that gets the title in the startup. The spouse is the secret co-founder. There's some in the room.
Yes, and nods everywhere.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Spouse is the secret co-founder. Kids often, friends and parents. There's. I was very lucky to sell my company, and I can tell you for a fact there are no self-made millionaires or billionaires, and it's a myth that we talk about in our society that people can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and nobody gets to where they are alone. Exactly. If you have 4 startups that all failed, you're called a failed entrepreneur. But if you have 4 startups that failed and 1 that succeeded, you're called a serial entrepreneur. I guess that's a way of saying that there's no it's never too late to turn things around, and the only way that you get to a successful startup is through people, because the line between successful and unsuccessful startups is vanishingly thin. We almost went out of business 4 times before we succeeded.
Right, but mom got in there. Is that right?
Yeah.
That was the one hero that you put up. Yeah. Yes, I love it. Natasha.
Very top of mind, and hopefully good practice. I would have to say my sister, whose wedding is next week, so I'm preparing my speech on top of mind. But my older sister, I just followed in all of her footsteps, and she did it all before me, and I got to watch and learn, and then she helped me along the way. And I don't know how she did it without someone to help. And so just having someone you can always call, no matter what, read every single resume, cover letter, give feedback, and not care and not judge you, and be there for all those tough moments. So yeah,
that's
my little
fantastic.
sister.
And what a great thing for your speech. I talked about you in Climate Week.
Yeah. She's gonna be like, don't bring that up.
Oh, she's featured.
Let's see. I'm going to go a different direction just for counter programming here. So when I worked on the Inslee for President campaign, like I was saying, part of my job was basically to travel on the road with him and set up these trips and kind of take what would normally be traditional, like a presidential campaign stop, and find the climate angle and find the climate spin, and then set the trip up and bring the press and do all the other stuff. And so one trip that I set up was with this woman named Teresa Landrum. She is a Black woman. She's lived in the River Rouge area outside of Detroit her entire life. No real formal education or training. And the area where she lived is just covered in petrochemical plants. I mean, We're talking like the local playground, the swing, you look out over smokestacks that are just blowing pollution. And this woman knows just about everything you could possibly know about how to make these chemicals, because they've been polluting her neighborhood and effectively killing all of her neighbors and her family for her entire life. And she spent so much time with me as I was scouting this trip, and the whole dynamic of it could have felt kind of very icky, right? Like everything from the fact that I was just like the presidential campaign staffer that was going to come to kind of shine a spotlight on her plight. But instead we struck up this really amazing friendship. And she is this incredible woman, and she has sort of self-taught everything that it requires to take to fight kind of the big corporations and the evil people that we are working to fight against. And one of the things that came up in the conversation many conversations I had with her, but over that time was, she sort of kept saying this idea of, it's great that you're here. It's great that you care about environmental justice, but my community has never had a voice in the White House. And so one of the things that came out of the conversation, and I went back to the Inslee team, was that we actually wrote into our plans, maybe we should have an environmental justice council in the White House. So for the first time, members of environmental justice communities, people who were actually most affected, could have a voice and a seat at the table and advise us on what we should do. And one thing led to another, and the Biden team ended up picking it up, and for the first time ever, there was an environmental justice council in the White House.
And she got on it, Teresa?
She wasn't on it, but another woman that she worked very closely with was on it, yeah.
So Mom, Sis, Teresa. Excellent. That's fantastic. I'm going to add Jose Marie onto the list for you. As you guys have a think about your questions, if you can get your hand up, I think we might have a mic to run as well. If you've got any questions for this amazing panel. My Jose Marie is former president of Costa Rica. I worked for him in the carbon war, which is back when entrepreneurs and climate change wasn't a thing yet, but we thought this is a thing. And as a former president, the thing that struck me was just how nice he was to everybody and how last to speak he was. And you just thought, that's how you lead. You can get that high and still be a brilliant person. And that was a lesson that I've been taking everywhere since. Has anyone any good questions for these amazing people? Yes, nice and quick. Have we got a mic, or do you want mine? Oh, you do? Yes, thank you.
Yep, we'll do. I'll try my best. It's a tough ask. So my question is for Steph. Vivek, doing my MPA at Columbia. And my question for you is about whether you think it's more effective to drive impact in the public or private space, because you were talking about your journey with your company and also the work that you did with the Obama administration. So I'd love to get your take on which kind of area you think is more impactful to focus on when it comes to environment, and particularly food systems. Sorry, long question, actually. It ended up being long.
You tried. It's good.
I think that if that's a personal question, you should ask yourself, who do you want to be surrounded by? Do you want to be surrounded by business people, or do you want to be surrounded by public servants? Very different people. And I think you can be as impactful in both. In our climate tech class we teach at Yale, we talk about how every business needs to be concerned not just with the science and the product, but they need to be concerned with policy, and they need to be concerned with overall markets, because it is an ecosystem. In order to solve climate change, we need the whole ecosystem to work. So every sector has a really important role. I loved working in government. I loved being at that systemic change level, getting to be creative and operating the 35,000 feet and being super strategic. But I also over time got tired of that level. Like, I so deeply crave the conversations like you just described with your hero, and the stories on the ground, and like seeing the effect of the work, which you can get in a business. So where are you in your life? And like, you should oscillate between those over the course of your career.
And I think even though you asked it just to Steph,
I think everyone would have interesting things
exactly.
to say.
Maggie, what's your opinion?
I completely second the way that Steph answered that question. I think, again, if it's personal, I would ask yourself sort of, where do you think you have the greatest superpower? Where is the place that you want to be, and what is the kind of change that you want to make? And certainly you can't be successful in government without good partners in the private sector, and you can't be successful in the private sector without good partners in government. And so you really need both of them working together. And so keep us posted
Great.
on where you go.
Natasha, you've got an ad?
I think ultimately both are driven by money. So whichever you pick is probably gonna come from the same pot. And I agree. Just pick what kind of goes for your own sake and where you feel like you can make the most impact.
I'm going to chip in. I've got. I think this was a second hand and that was a third hand. But I'm going to chip in with Jose Maria's wisdom, which was like, sometimes he also used to say, it's not what happens in the sectors; it's the intersection between the sectors. So can you work on where those sectors intersect? That's another thought.
Very short. What's your antidote to climate doom when it sneaks up on you?
I think taking a action, not taking literally any action, is palliative to me, and then it inspires me to do more. So just like literally anything, it could be a really small thing.
For me, it's talking to our founders, of just like hearing what thing they accomplished today, whether it, like how tiny it was or big. It's super inspiring, and I think that always keeps me going.
Yeah, I'm the same as Steph, taking action. When about like a year into working at the White House, I became obsessed with taking our compost to the local farmers market and dropping it off. And it was like religion for me. I was like, if I don't do this on Saturdays, like the whole week is ruined. And I remember thinking back on it and being like, oh, maybe this is actually like a function of my job, and like I have a little bit of control in this moment over taking my compost. So very similarly, I think just anything that, sort of gives me agency and control and makes me feel like I'm contributing to kind of the larger whole.
Great, thanks. I think we've got time for one or two more. There you go.
Hi, I'm Nate, class of '82. I created the Harbor School on Governor's Island, as well as the Billion Oyster Project. I guess my answer to the doom question is read Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson's What If We Get It Right? So that's one answer. My question is, what can we do? How can we do better at getting climate education at every level of schooling, starting in pre-K, all the way through high school, not just in college?
Thank you.
I mean, the amazing thing about both people my age and younger, and at all levels of education, I still consider myself a young person for what it's worth, is that, climate is part of our lives, right? It's our future. And I think there's often, at least what I kind of found with wrestling with this question kind of from the government perspective, and one of the big projects I worked on was to found the American Climate Corps, which put 20,000 young people to work on climate and clean energy related careers. Like, it's not, I think older people often think that it's like a negotiation with younger people, but younger people actually like want to do this, right? Like, we want to work on climate. We see our future. And so I think that there is just a sort of this reframe that needs to happen about, like, this is the career opportunity, right? When you talk about emerging markets, it's to get a job in climate and clean energy. And so I think there's huge opportunity sort of for not just sort of traditional environmental education, maybe as we would have known or as we had when we were little and in elementary school, but really reframing the way that we think about educating ourselves on climate.
Great. Natasha?
Yeah, what I love about climate is it's so interdisciplinary, right? Every single topic touches climate, and I think from just an early age that should be brought into the conversation. Like, I think about when we study Hurricane Katrina, I don't think climate is talked about enough in that disaster. Like, it was early to kind of the moment. And so I think looking back on what people are learning from the earliest stages and making sure like that aspect of the conversation is really brought in. And then honestly, like, being outside from an early age and like making sure that people have contact with that and like understanding, the space that you are inhabiting and how to be a good steward.
part of why I want to start the media company is because the way we need to teach climate and talk about climate needs to be exciting and sexy and cooler than it is right now, and like it's a little depressing for sure. But we could build games that teach people, little kids, about climate in a way that they're not getting now. I would like to produce a kids TV show that's basically the modern Captain Planet that makes these solutions heroes. And so how do we make it entertainment first? Because let's be honest, that's gonna help more people hear the message than if we're pedantic about it.
Yeah. And how do we thread it in? So it's not this vertical. It's true. And actually, that's why, just to bring us to a close, because we're on lunch. That's why you saw both the courses that Yale has put out on this leadership piece and hunting for a job. There's no mention of climate anywhere. Just every example in there is an environmental person. So my idea is, don't brand it, but get everyone in, and then they get like, oh, I should really do this. I should change the system this way. So thank you very much, everyone. Keep your purpose, keep your practice, put them together, and talk to these amazing people at lunch. Thank you very much.